Hi everybody, this is Chris Gabbitas, Artistic Director of the Phoenix Chorale, and I'm delighted to be speaking today with Carrie Tennant, who is a founding director of the Vancouver Youth Choir, and also of Herbert Washington, who is a musical director, artistic director of the Phoenix Boys Choir. It's so great to have you both here with me today. Thank you for joining me.
Good to see you, Chris.
Yeah, well, we were just chatting before we pressed record about how our various organizations are dealing with socially distanced music making. And I'd love you to tell people who are watching what you're doing and how you pivoted to make sure that you can still create content and make art during these times.
Well, I'll start. So the Phoenix Boys Choir, obviously that this pandemic has hit every choir and every arts organization to its core, right? Financially, musically, and has not allowed, really just stripped away the idea of engagement and has created a world of isolation for these boys, especially for our boys, the Phoenix Boys Choir. And so we've been focusing on innovative ways, and we're coming up on the anniversary right now of this pandemic. March 17th is when we started our first online rehearsal. And so that alone is hitting the boys very interesting enough that they are feeling this sense of sadness, even right now that it's coming back around. And so since that day, we've been on Zoom. I believe that the world has shifted to Zoom or some type of online platform. And we've been engaging the boys that way, having 1-hour rehearsals, or we've actually seen them more now than we did in our normal schedule. And so that's been great. But recently, we've just started our car choir initiative, our car choir engagement tool, which basically is utilizing the radio frequency similar to a drive-in theater. But the boys, imagine boys having microphones in the car, which is a whole nother ball of wax, but having boys in the car with microphones, with receivers, headphones, and I'm able to synchronously sing with them, and they're synchronously sing with each other. So that was a very novel idea, which we did not create. We basically borrowed that from Luminous Voices. I think that the world had seen Luminous Voices do that in Canada. And but it has been wonderful to see the boys finally engage with each other, have the families near each other in the vicinity, and we're still masked, but they have their own recording studio right now, if you will. So we've been recording and getting ready for our next concert, which is March 13th, next week, next Saturday or so. And that's been where every day is a struggle to innovate and to try to engage. And I think that we're all feeling the same way these days.
That's great. I mean, I think it's wonderful to hear the way that people are innovating. And I was watching the Canadian project as well, the Luminous project, and I think it is absolutely fantastic. I think there was some guy in Princeton who had the original idea. I think it was Princeton or Yale, and then it was taken on by this Canadian. Yeah,
right.
And it's just the most brilliant idea. And I mean, over here, we're reopening drive-in movie theatres as well, which we haven't had in Britain for such a long time. And this is almost like a drive-in choral experience. I think it's really appealing. I think it's fantastic. So I'm glad that you've kept that level of engagement and enthusiasm amongst the boys, but also so sad to hear that the anniversary is hitting them in a very emotional way. I think we often underestimate the importance of the regular community that music can bring. And I know, Carrie, I know that you've come up with some really interesting ideas to keep people together in person.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, Herbert, with what you're saying about your singers feeling that anniversary. I sense that with my kids as well, really deeply. But we've been in a slightly different situation up here. We were lucky at the very beginning that we were able to still meet in person, again, with a million changes and protocols, smaller groups, masked, and we were outdoors. And we rehearsed in the parkade tower at the university, which is mostly shut down, so there was no students coming to park. So that was one thing we were able to do, and we kind of we ended up rehearsing every 2 weeks just to help with safety. And then on the off weeks, we had Zoom workshops with, I'm focusing this season on culture bearers. So we have had Zoom workshops with people in choirs in South Africa and all over the world, just learning about different vocal cultures. And that's kind of been the other half of our program. Here in Canada, we have this amazing coalition called the Bridge Collective that we formed with 7 different youth and young adult choirs from across the country, like coast to coast. And so together we've been putting on these bridge workshops for our singers. It's a major part of my programming. And we've cost shared all these workshops with amazing clinicians. We worked with Jacob Collier, we worked with Michael McGlynn and Anuna. We're doing a workshop with the Philippine Madrigal Singers next week. And that's been a really amazing thing, a real silver lining for the singers to not only be able to learn directly from these artists, but also to connect with singers kind of across the country socially. And we do lots of connecting things as well between the choirs. And so that's been really special, and I feel really lucky for that. We are now completely online since the middle of November, I guess, and that's been really challenging for me. I'm really introverted in a lot of ways, so like even being on the podium sometimes, I have to like psych myself up to just be in front of people like that, and I'm sure there's lots of conductors that can identify with the Zoom silence. That's been so challenging for me to plan for and prepare myself for, and I'm sure I'm hoping that's a journey that lots of people that are listening would be able to identify with. But it's getting better, and being on Zoom together, at least I can see the rest of their faces now, and that's a blessing. And we have time for conversations and connecting in different ways. And we're aiming for a live recording in May, based on the vaccine rollout here. So yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. I think it's fascinating that the sort of indomitable human spirit that we as musicians have had to employ to find new ways of connecting with students, with singers of whatever age and ability. And there are millions of singers out there who are missing the health and mental health and physical health benefits of singing each week. And it's interesting to hear you speak about the way that you use the opportunity to get influence from around the world, because within the music faculty where I teach in Redlands in California, we were talking last week with our Dean of College about what we've learned positively from lockdown. And in fact, the fact that it's gone on for so long has meant that we've acquired skills, and our students have acquired interest in learning skills, which they wouldn't ordinarily have thought about. So, for example, I was teaching an advanced conducting course last summer, which I couldn't really do over Zoom. So instead we pivoted and we talked about the philosophy of conducting and why we wanted to be conductors and what we wanted to achieve and deliver and communicate from the podium. And that's something I never would have had time to do normally, but I now feel it's an imperative part of teaching those students to go behind the technique and work out who they are as people and how they want to communicate that. So there's a real benefit in the enforced online learning in some ways. Herbert, have you found things which you're going to take on and continue?
Oh, for sure. So the silver lining, and Carrie, thank you for sharing that. It's great to see that we are in the same boat. One thing that we took away from this is that our theory program can be extremely robust via social media or online, if you will. And the other thing is that these boys, or our boys, will be little mini audio engineers in the future, right? They're technologically savvy. We didn't know we needed it. They didn't know they needed it, and it was coming. But now they are understanding mic technique. We have a studio. We just required a studio in our building here. So, I'm gathering more equipment so that they understand how to use mics, how to run a DAW, run a board, a mixing board. I mean, these boys are getting world experience, which I know as young musicians, you end up, in the future, recording yourself in some way, shape, or form. And so I think that's a skill that I had no idea that they were going to need or utilize in the future. I wanted to go quickly and talk about, you were just talking about mental health, and that was one major issue that we've just seen across the board, is that the mental stability is declining with musicians across the board, but especially young people. And choral music has that just the choral arts has the power to uplift and encourage and empower. And our journey here has been focused on that. We've been focused on creating a program called the Mind, Body, Spirit, and Voice program. And it's basically a way to connect the boys from their home to their school and their work in an extracurricular activity, mainly the boys' choir. And so that they can see that all of those worlds are not only connected, but the consequences and the awards happen simultaneously in all three parts of our worlds. And so not being in person, we were trying to figure out a way of how to connect and keep these boys motivated. And that was a real struggle for us. And I think we've been doing a really a decent job at trying to engage and empower these young men to still be motivated to go out into the world using choral music to be successful and to be lights in this world. But yeah, there's some silver lining skills that, I just didn't know that was going to be needed. But we're taking we're making the most of this situation. And I think as everyone else is attempting to do.
That's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that so openly and with vulnerability. I think a lot of people find it very difficult to voice when they miss something which matters so much in their lives. And I think I know we all would encourage anybody out there who's watching and listening who is struggling because they miss music in their lives or they feel they could benefit from that, do reach out and try to find an outlet, because they're all there for all of us. And it's so important to have a way of connecting with that visceral nature of musicianship, which every human possesses. And I suppose as organizations, what we can all learn, the absence of music has hit us very, very hard. And that means that we can imagine what life might be like for people who never have the opportunity to sing or congregate together and experience music. And that neatly brings me on to the idea of we need to do more to make sure that anybody who might benefit from that and might want to do it has the access and the opportunity to do so. I know that all three of our organizations are working hard, in an overdue way, to try to make sure that along with other musicians, we can get out there and reach people. And I think the younger the potential singer, the younger the musician, the more important it is. Herbert was talking with me about this yesterday. And Carrie, I'd love your views about that. I mean, in Vancouver, it must be so important to go out and reach all those thousands of children who are going to benefit from music but don't really know it exists.
Yeah, our city is very diverse, incredibly multicultural, and my choir is really diverse and multicultural. As a result of that, I mean, I have a huge percentage of newcomers. I'm not sure what you would call them newcomers in the US, but new Canadians, people that are new to Canada, or their parents were, over 50% of my choir. So I wouldn't take responsibility for that. It's a reflection of the city and the culture of our city, of being a very inclusive city. But it's something I am no doubt proud of. And I spend a lot of time programming and a lot of effort programming music that reflects the diversity of the singers that are in our program. That being said, and I do feel that nationally that's a real priority. Inclusivity and diversity I can't speak to the choral world at large, but in the world of youth choirs, I can speak confidently and say that I really feel that's a huge priority for the conductors in our country that are dealing with youth. And then another thing that we have that's really important to Canadian culture is kind of righting the massive injustices of the past in terms of our First Nations and Inuit and Métis people in Canada. And right now, figuring out ways to be part of that reconciliation as choral artists, and how to help be facilitators of that change. And so we're all really making it a priority to learn more and be better at that.
And programming is so key for that, isn't it? Because we need to allow people to identify with what we're presenting as musicians. I think with the Phoenix Chorale, which is a professional adult choir, by the time we hold auditions and open them up to the whole community, we're kidding ourselves if we think that those are in fact completely open auditions, because so many people are ruled out of considering themselves for those places because they might not identify with our programming or with the culture that we put forth, or what we wear on stage even, or how we present ourselves. And we have to work out a way of making our organization as approachable as possible to allow for other cultures to feel that they can feed into our melting pot, and we can change from within. I think programming is absolutely key to that, isn't it, really? I mean, how do you approach programming to help right some of those wrongs, Carrie?
Well, exactly what you just said. I mean, people need to see a reflection of themselves in the art that's being created. And so I feel like when I'm programming concerts, not only for the singers, but also for the audience, that it's my job to both affirm and challenge. And so many, with the programming, so many, I feel like a lot of conductors constantly want to challenge. So outside people's norms or comfort level, or they have something that they want to demonstrate that they know. But I think that I try to make sure that the kids and the audience see themselves in every program, and they see something outside themselves in every program. And so in that way, I'm constantly trying and always learning, but I'm trying to both include and expand in the singers and in the audience.
Yeah, very true. Herbert, what's your view of how we approach this?
Well, I think that as choral artists, we have an obligation to always, I love what you said, Carrie, about affirming, but educating and showcasing the community at large, the community that we live in, and to continue to encourage a change in society. That's very difficult. It's long overdue, but it's not too late. And so every day that we meet with our singers is an opportunity to instill a love of a respect for opinions and people, and to be co-conspirators in this particular case. I would think just like the major change of what has been to right those wrongs that have been done in our world, in our society. So. Programming to me, this year, what I wanted to focus on is our concert is called A Blueprint for Peace. And we focused on 4 different aspects, looking at an individual's process, a journey that one must go through to eradicate social injustices. And that was, awakening and being understanding that just acknowledging that there are issues in this world that we must face, and it's painful, but we must face them head on. And secondly, imagining a world, visioning the world that we would want to see. And by the way, I'm going to have to grab my computer cable just to let you know. So, and I'll do that in a moment here. The third, which is coming up, is a courageous journey. And the courageous journey is focusing on looking back on the leaders and the future leaders of our time, and seeing how they contributed so they can be an example for us. And our final concert is Unity of Voices, which is basically us finally coming together as one and making a difference in this world. So there is I think programming needs to be purposeful and intentional, and really dive into how can you connect the audience to your work. And so we've had books, we've given books titles to the audience members so that they can hopefully read and study up before we have the concert and perform. And then that will bring a full circle connection to our work that we do on stage, or in this particular case, a virtual concert.
That's fantastic. That's great work. And I know that certainly Herbert's off to get his cable. But certainly finding myself almost as an outsider coming into the North American music world and listening quite hard to the debates that are going on about inclusivity and about access, and learning a lot about new repertoire, which was outside my sphere of influence for so many years. It's been a roller coaster ride to discover how much richness of culture and repertoire there is, which is just not approached by so many choirs historically. And that's exciting because, you know, I'm a music geek, and anytime I get to experience new music I don't know, I'm pretty happy. So I'm like a kid in a candy store. This is a good thing to me. And I was speaking with Herbert recently as well about how we approach music, which perhaps isn't within our own cultural legitimacy or authenticity as directors to approach, and the importance of actually looking at a method of learning so that we can appreciate how that music came to be, but then not parody it, actually put our own voice and our own stamp on of that to create this wonderful hybrid of artistic content, which has a richness far greater than the individual parts in many ways. And, you know, I think the more we can collaborate as organizations and the more we can truly look from the bottom upwards, what you guys are doing by getting kids in. And the more kids we can get in, the more role models we can have that are inclusive. I mean, it's wonderful, Herbert, that you're leading such a renowned ensemble, because that makes you a fantastic role model for some kids who perhaps otherwise wouldn't identify with the organization. Is that something you found in your tenure so far?
Well, it's only been 2 years, but it feels like 10. So at the moment, you know, I will say that when you talk about access, so I'm a blessed and lucky, you know, young person of color, because most, you know, African Americans in the community that I grew up in hasn't had any access to any choral music, right? They might have been in a school where they had to sing, but they could care less about it. I was lucky enough to have a music teacher who, you know, looked at me and when I was wearing my Buffalo Bill Cody outfits on stage and in plays and whatnot, you know, she would look at me and say, "You need to join the Phoenix Boys Choir." Now, I had no idea what in the world Phoenix Boys Choir was, or that it was a possibility, but that changed the outcome. That changed where I'm at right now. And so I'm trying to do my due diligence of getting out into the community and just showcase that there are other genres of music out there that, you can be successful and just as cool being in a choir. And as a matter of fact, most of the people that you've seen, your popular artists that you revere and admire, they were in a choir. They most likely had their foundations in some type of choral ensemble. And so we need to do a better job at being out in the community, in diverse communities, especially in the churches. And we talked about this yesterday, that we've got to start as young as possible and showcase that there is one life beyond high school choir, that there are professional ensembles like the ones that you are all leading, and do our part at trying to make a greater representation of the community. So right now I account for about, more than half of the diversity that's in, my ensembles, and that's not okay. And so it's my job and my obligation to be out in the community and trying to get more young people to understand that this is a safe place for them, and a place that will ultimately help you be successful in the world, because you are part of a greater, of what I think is a greater good.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. Thank you. I think that is the mission and the message that we all need to take from the current situation. And we have an opportunity when we do restart this fall in whatever capacity, to approach this side of our recruitment and this side of our outreach and this side of our mission in a very, very different way, because we've got so much thinking time right now. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes on for every virtual choir, but we have got time to pause for thought, and I think there's so much value in that. And Carrie, you're lucky to be in a community where there is a lot of diversity and everyone's happy with that. Hello. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Little visitor. Yeah, you've got a very diverse city and a very, very diverse community and a very, very diverse ensemble as a result. And it's wonderful that your ensemble reflects your community in such a, it seems like in such a natural way. Why is that? Why is it easier for you in Vancouver, hypothetically, than it is for us in Phoenix?
I don't know, actually. I'm trying to think about the other children's and youth choirs in the city and if it's similar. And I do feel like my choir is more diverse, maybe than others. I suspect it's because of the diversity of our programming, the music that we're picking, and also that they can tell that even though that we don't take ourselves too seriously, even though we take the art making extraordinarily seriously. Well, I don't know, there's a sense of fun. I don't know.
Yeah, the performance that you did at ACDA in Kansas City. I can't remember if I was sitting next to Herbert for that one. I was sitting next to Herbert for a couple of them, but I remember watching and hearing your choir, and there was, I forget the title of the piece, but it was a wonderful piece where you did some choreography, and then you yourself turned around and joined in with the choreography and brought the audience into it, and that fourth wall was completely broken. And I think as performers, so often it's almost like there's a glass barrier between the podium and the audience, and that's not an encouraging way to draw people in. And what you did, and it's a very much a rainbow ensemble, it was incredibly diverse, both in terms of repertoire and singer personnel and the way that you approached the artistry. And I thought that was really inspiring. So what made you sort of come up with the idea of, let's break this fourth wall down and let's really bring everybody into the picture?
I don't know. I always do stuff like that because I think it's, in every performance, it's essential that the audience has a moment of reflection, has a moment to be like deeply meditative, and has a moment to laugh, and has a moment to be sad and grieve about something. I just feel like it's kind of your responsibility to give the audience and the artists an opportunity to experience all of those, if possible, in a concert. So I really I have no shame when it comes to like we did the Macarena. I don't know if you remember, but it was the Macarena at the National ACDA, and and that was, I think, the kids' idea. I can't remember. I wanted to mention like one project in terms of diversity that might be interesting that we're working on. We have a new free choir that we're launching next month called VYC Kindred, and it's specifically for newcomers, new Canadian youth in the city. And it occurred to me to talk about this because you were saying we have a moment to think and reflect right now, time, and it's only because of that time that I was able to kind of flesh out this idea. But I've always wanted to have a choir for newcomers because we have so many in our organization. I just thought it would be great for people who have been here for 2 years to mentor people that have just arrived, and thought that'd be a really beautiful relationship. But I'm thinking about teaching this choir and how they would, what am I going to teach them? Well, maybe we'll do some rope music, some Canadian folk songs, or maybe I'll teach them a South African song by rote, or, all this. And then I'm like, why are we not learning the music of this place, the First Nations music of this land that they've just arrived on? And so this choir is now evolved into a free newcomer choir, and they're working with two really celebrated First Nations singers and song creators, and they're learning First Nations music from this land. I'm really excited about it.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that is very exciting. And yeah, absolutely. I think the time to pause for thought is really, really useful. And I would say endorsing what you just said, to anybody out there who's, frustrated about the hiatus we have at the moment, try to see that opportunity to come up with a new idea. And if there's perceived wrongs in the music industry where you are, see if you can help to right those wrongs by coming up with a constructive and productive idea for change. It's certainly what we're trying to do. So we can keep working on that. But I was really blown away by that ACDA performance. I remember, I think I did sit near to you, Herbert, because we were talking about it at the time, and it was so refreshing, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. I remember that. I love to try and have programming that breaks down that fourth wall. I think the audience needs to be participators in a way, emotionally, physically, and hold on, I have my young guy now. Hello.
Your turn next, Carrie.
Yeah, mine are cool.
Carrie, bring him on. Yes, you know. Yes, you know. So the one silver lining, I have my son with me every day, which is great because in a normal capacity, he's in school, and I wouldn't get the opportunity to watch him grow. So I get to see the great work that the teachers and educators are doing, and have a newfound respect for their work, even though I've been in that position as well. So
it's great.
But, go ahead, Chris.
No, you.
So I was just saying that it is super important to give a variety of pieces and thought into how we program, and especially to again have those audience members be participators in this process, as it is I think it's a collaborative process. Even when I don't want audience members just to come and view, but I want it to be insightful. I want them to pull on the heartstrings a little bit, but and hopefully leave fulfilled and empowered to go out into the world and continue doing wonderful things. So and to provide just that inspirational hope that we all need, and that's what the whole idea of choral music is about.
Agreed. It's about making what we do, I think, fit for purpose for the modern age as well. And music through the ages has always changed and morphed into whatever society needs it to be at that point in time. And we're facing some seismic changes in the way that we live, quite rightly, and many of them are long overdue. And, we come from a position as choral musicians generally of such privilege, such enduring privilege, and the weight of that privilege is very, very hard to attract perhaps a non-traditional audience. And so it's beholden upon us to change that through programming and through choreography and through breaking down that fourth wall and through flash mobs and through Zoom choirs and whatever else it might be. And I think it's really, really inspiring to take that responsibility and see it as an opportunity to see what we can do with it. So thank you. That was a fantastic discussion about what we need to do to help continue this good work. And I wanted to ask you actually just before, as we reach towards the end, what were your individual journeys? Because I think it's always inspiring to young musicians out there to hear the stories of those who've gone before. So, Carrie, how did you get involved with choral music and end up where you are now?
Well, I sang in choirs as a kid and through high school, but in high school I had a great band teacher. And, we all know that, educators and mentors are so powerful in people's journeys. So I actually ended up thinking I was in love with the clarinet, and I did an undergrad in the clarinet. Instrumental music, and about halfway through I was like, something's missing, and I worked up the nerve to audition for the University Chamber Choir, was directed by Bruce Moore. He's a phenomenal conductor. And at my first rehearsal, that sensation of like something just fitting on your skin, like it just felt like, I just had this realization that I don't love the clarinet. I don't love concert band music, and this is not where I want to be. I just spent, the next until now, next 20 years, trying to figure out how to be better and learn how to be better at being a choral conductor, because I knew that's what I wanted to do. So, yeah, I spent hundreds of hours visiting people's rehearsals, observing, going to every festival, conference, everything, just because I'd spent my undergrad learning about the clarinet. So, yeah, and I continue to do that. So, for me, the love was kind of always there. But because I had a really influential high school teacher as an instrumental student, I kind of took a little detour and came back.
And how did you?
And did you ask how I have? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's interesting, because a colleague of mine at Redlands, who's a colleague of yours as well in Vancouver, Nicole Andrews, another Canadian.
Yes.
She was an oboist for many years, and then switched from that to choral music as well. So it's a similar story. And now, of course, she directs the Phoenix Chamber Choir up in Vancouver, which is wonderful. So I'm sure you guys are going to be able to work together as well while you're up there. So I think lots of instrumentalists have come to that choral love, and that's a good thing for us, because the skills that you learn as an instrumentalist of, vertical score reading and thinking like that are so imperative and tuning. Instrumentalist tuning is so important to create good choral singers. So so you got to that point. What gave you the inspiration or the idea for the Vancouver Youth Choir?
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, speaking of privilege and being really lucky, I don't know if Diane Loomer is a name that people in the U.S. know. I mean, she came from Minnesota, but all Canadians know Diane Loomer. She conducted founded and conducted Corleone Men's Choir here and Electra Women's Choir along with Morna Edmondson. And I was her assistant conductor for Corleone. And when she passed away, she left me money to start my own organization, just to get it off the ground. And her husband, her widow, was my first board chair. He's passed away now, but basically she said, "What do you want to do? What's your dream?" And I want to support that. And I said, "I've always wanted to have my own youth choir." And so she basically, VYC exists because of her. I'm incredibly lucky.
That's a wonderful legacy for her, though. I mean, you are very lucky, but I think that luck wouldn't have come about if it weren't for the work that you'd done and the service you'd given to your benefactress and her organization. So I think it's important to recognize when we've had good fortune, but also when we've put our own efforts in to make things happen. And what you're doing now is a legacy for her and giving back to your community. So, good things are springing from that gift, which is a wonderful thing. And thank you for sharing that. That's fantastic. Herbert, how about you? I know that you started in the boys' choir, but how did it all come about that you found your way back?
Well, I come from a family of gospel musicians, so they're all their ears are incredible. And I was the only one that actually went off to school and learned how to read music. But I wish that I could be stronger in the oral tradition of just playing, hearing, and being able to transcribe and that's the sort of thing. But my family is all gospel musicians. And so in the church, I would have to sit at the piano and they would sing and I'd have to play whatever and follow right along. And that's pretty much how we get started. But in the choir with the Phoenix Boys Choir, again, it was my fourth grade music teacher who saw some potential and said I should try out. And what really attracted me to the idea of choir was I came from a family that dealt with drugs and alcohol, and I was in the foster care system at one point. And so I was always missing the idea, and I tell my boys even to this day, I was always missing the idea of family, which is why choir is so important, right? You get an opportunity to create a family that is that actually has some longevity, and it has a great impact in the world. So when I got to the choir, I traveled when I was 10 to Japan and the Philippines. And being able to travel for 4 weeks at a time with an ensemble makes you extremely close. And that became my new family. As a matter of fact, the mother who I spoke of earlier, who was battling some issues right now, she was the nurse of the Phoenix Boys Choir for 30 years. And that became my mother, who then introduced me to David Hine, who was a part of St. Olaf Choir. That was my high school teacher. And that's how I got to Minnesota, where it was freezing, but I loved every minute of it because the arts are strong in the Midwest. And and then had the privilege of meeting Dr. Anton Armstrong and many other incredible educators there. And that was the journey. But if it wasn't for the Phoenix Boys Choir taking me in and then giving me that love of travel, because that was my escape. I think choir has always been a wonderful escape for me, and maybe many others can relate, and that resonates with the rest of you. But when I can leave my family situation and run to music, where I find my solace, and that was everything to me. So I was hooked, line and sinker, after that moment, and being able to just sing. And I think it's so interesting that my 7-year-old is very similar, because he's a very independent kid, but he's a socialite, and he loves to be around the other boys and love to be around other girls who sing, and he just wants to be around kids, and choir gives them that idea, right? Choir is where we make our lifelong friends in many situations, and so this is certainly a place where the boys can be boys like I was when I was 9, and then continue to sing as older men, all the way into their 80s, which is great. So this is a place where we foster lifelong singing.
And how did you find your way back to that particular position then, and come full circle? Did you go back to Phoenix after Minnesota?
So right after Minnesota, I came back and I studied. Basically, I was interning, jack of all trades, for Georg Strangelberger, who was from the Vienna tradition, and he was my predecessor. He was here 20 years, and so I was in and out of the Phoenix Boys Choir. As a counselor, as operations manager, my role was to learn the business, and so I was also town choir director. And then I went off into work with the Phoenix Children's Chorus, and then the Chandler Children's Choir, and then to work in the high school system. So my love for music, I've just been kind of hopping around, finding my way. And, it just so happened that the boys choir was, after Georg resigned, was looking for someone to take the helm, and I think they love the idea that I'm an alum as well, but I also have local connections. I'm very much tied into ACDA, AZACDA board, and I love to support the work of our educators, because I think that's our role as professional artists in this particular nonprofit sector, is that we need to completely supplement and assist those educators in the work that they're doing in the schools on a daily basis. And so I think that's our obligation as community leaders.
That's the common theme, really. I mean, speaking both to you and to Carrie, you were inspired by school music teachers to further your talents and your skills, and it's brought you to where you are today. And we all salute the wonderful music ed majors and the wonderful high school and elementary school music teachers who have that spark of inspiration to pick out those diamond potential musicians and inspire them and infuse them that, this can be a way that you get into a life which can follow you for the rest of your days in a very, very positive way. And I experienced the same, really. My parents were enthusiastic about music, but it was really teachers at school that inspired me to be able to get to the point where I could make a career and a living through it. And sometimes it's bewildering to me to try to get out there and go to schools and help people as well, but it's because there are so many. How do we find all the kids that are talented, and how do we get all of them in one place, and how do we encourage all of them to do? So we need the help of the teachers, and I think you're right. Our role is to support those teachers, endorse what they're doing, go into the schools, present recitals, do things which say to any kid, hey, if this floats your boat, we're here for you, and we want you to come and be with us and enjoy something which could become a really special part of your life and take you out of any troubles you may be facing and provide a safe space for you to feel enriched. Which is a great note to sort of wrap up on, I think. It's been really great talking with both of you. Is there one more thing that each of you would like to say to the listeners out there, the viewers, people who might be wanting to get into choral music or have children who might want to get into choral music?
I think that it is way more difficult to be young right now than it was when I was a kid. Um, and for a huge number of reasons. But one of the big ones, it appears to me, is just that they're constantly plugged in. And it's not that they don't have the discipline to unplug. It's like it's almost impossible to unplug and to be offline and still be part of the social fabric of their school or their friendships or their, it's just so hard. And so they're kind of on all the time. I just don't think there's been enough research. And is that your puppy?
Yeah.
I don't think there's, oh, sweetheart.
Oh.
I don't think there's enough research that's kind of gone into what the implications of that is going to be. And I'm seeing in my kids just a really alarming, over the last 10 years, an alarming rise in the number of singers in my ensembles that have been diagnosed with depression and anxiety or receiving medication or, I just think that more than ever, singing in a choir is so essential because it's just this one moment of respite in their week or their day where they're in a really authentic way, human to human, to other human beings. I just think it's more essential than ever.
Thank you. Agreed. Very much
Thank
so.
you.
Yeah, agreed. Herbert.
You know, I think it's just important to join choir. The whole purpose of singing is to provide a space where we can come together and put down our biases, that we really can take the time to, and I love the word examine, Carrie, I'm just going to borrow that we can examine our own issues and we can all come to one unified table through music and come out with one unified outcome and one voice. And that is, I think that's the purpose of what we should always be focused on when we're in a choral setting. But also to choral space is a great way to continue the talk about diversity and inclusion and access and equity, and to continue that work, because oftentimes, I was talking to Carrie before we shut down, that oftentimes we start this process, this very rigorous process of protesting or rioting or whatever it may be, to raise our voices and to scream out at the top of our lungs, right? But then a month later, that all subsides. And we have to figure out a way, how do we keep that dialogue going? Well, being a part of choir, if you think about it, most of the music that you sing opens your heart up to understanding the plights of other humans and understanding the stories that we all share, that we all have adversity, we all have trials and tribulations, but we all share a common goal of wanting to be loved, wanting to have that trust factor, and wanting to be unified in a way that really empowers and benefits not only yourself but others around you. And so I'm a huge and we all are just huge advocates and proponents of singing. And I would say that to just give it a shot, give it a chance. Dr. Armstrong has always said that if every politician was a singer, we wouldn't have the issues that we deal with today, right? And I so heartedly believe that. And so I would just say that's the beauty of music, the power to unify our voices together. And despite our different differences of opinions and thoughts, but it breeds respect and humanism at its core.
Agreed. You're reminding me of when I was doing the 50th anniversary season with the King Singers, and we were performing all over the world in 5 or 6 continents. I can't remember how many countries. And we would start nearly every performance with a piece written for us by Bob Chilcott, setting to music a poem by Maya Angelou called We Are. And throughout the entire piece was this phrase, "We are more alike than we are unalike, my friends." And I think that would be the theme for my 15 years of touring, that wherever I went around the world, and whether there was a language barrier or whether there were cultural differences or differences of experience of life, as soon as we started making music in masterclasses or from stage or in lobbies or in hotels or wherever we were, suddenly those differences just went out the window, and it just became, I mean, it's such a cliche to say music's a common language, but it is the universal language of the world in so many ways. And I feel that through the work that you're doing with these wonderful young people, and I thank you on behalf of all adult choir directors for the work that you're doing with young people, because your singers now are our singers of tomorrow. And the more you can enrich them now, the better the whole musical choral landscape looks. And we are all so similar in so many ways. And music really highlights that. So I'm just so grateful for your time and for your experience and your stories and the love that you give towards choral music. And I can't wait until I can be in one room with you both again, whenever that may be, and we can all make music again. It's inspiring. Thank you so much. It's been great to see you.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Chris.
Great to meet you, Herbert.